Do you hear that? They've decided to mow the lawn outside. Guess I'll have to wait. I think Mr. Lawnmower Man has gone away. Well, welcome back. And I thought I would talk a little bit this week about how much I love photographing on the iPhone. Now, I'm not going to be alone in this, not by a long shot. I know a bunch of photographers, amateur, professional, landscape, commercial, wedding, who do a heck of a lot of photography on their iPhone. And I would say that the iPhone is probably my most used camera. And the other thing that I find when using the iPhone is I seem to experiment and play a little bit more, both in terms of making the image, but also probably more so in editing the image as well. Now, if you remember when I was talking about my brief history in photography, I talked about the fact that one of the things that I'm missing, having looked back at that, is the fact that I don't seem to play as much with the camera, you know, just mucking about and taking a lot of sort of different shots of the same subject. And that would be true for the main camera, but certainly not true for the iPhone. I'm always photographing with this, and it can be, you know, whenever I'm out on an actual shoot, or it can just be walking up the road to the shops. Absolutely love photographing with the iPhone. Now, as I mentioned, as well as playing during the shooting process, I love to play around in the editing process, and by far my most used app for editing on the iPhone is Snapseed. What I find quite often when I'm editing photos that have been taken on the iPhone with the iPhone, I sometimes take it a little bit away from reality. And that's kind of quite often when I'm editing the photos that I've taken with the big boy camera, trying to kind of present something that perhaps is a little bit more representative of the day. But with the iPhone, I have a kind of a different mindset where I really am just playing about, and sometimes I'll even take it out of Snapseed and take it into a program to sort of deliver some textures or maybe even some other graphics on top of that. And I do find that whole process to be really good. And of course the Apple ecosystem kind of lends itself a little bit to that as well with its photo stream, because of course now I have a really 2012 iPad, but of course with photo stream, you know, I can be taking images with the iPhone. They'll go onto my photo stream, and then in maybe a day's time or a couple of days time, I'll be looking through things on the iPad and I'll be like, oh yeah, let's shoot in that. And of course Snapseed is also available for the iPad. Seriously considering getting a new iPad Pro, I must admit. Let's have a little bit of a play with one of the images in Snapseed, and I'll just show you some of the power that little app has. So here's an image that I have taken on the Isle of Mull. In fact, it's a cracking little stand of trees along Loch Spelv. Really beautiful, be it sort of during sort of summer, autumn, when you have plenty of foliage on the trees, right through to sort of gnarly winter. And I've visited this location several times. Really nice. Anyway, onto the image. So obviously down the bottom you have a bunch of sort of looks and presets. Think of these as your presets, and of course you can create presets as you go, but I'm normally trying to keep it pretty simple. And one of the most used tools that I use myself personally is Vintage. And so I actually have, within Vintage, you've again got a number of different presets within Vintage that will give you various looks, various gradient looks. And again, you can kind of play around with a lot of these. As you get sort of more familiar with Snapseed, or at least this is what I find, you'll sort of think you'll almost come to have a favorite couple of different sort of presets within that Vintage toolbox. Now obviously whenever you're actually in here as well, you can actually play about a little bit. Now the Vintage tool will apply quite a heavy vignette, and so quite often I will sort of reduce that down just a touch. And of course what you can do, top right hand corner, you've got the sort of before and the after settings. You have a brightness tab here, but of course because that's going to be, because you've got quite a heavy vignette, a lot of that brightness is applied mostly in the center. But again, it can just help you draw the eye into the subject. And then finally, the style strength as well. Now, of course, you could go completely bonkers and put it all the way up to the top, each to their own. Again, I'm normally sort of in and around the sort of 25-30 mark, just something quite subtle. And again, we can just have a little bit of a play with the before and the after. Whenever you think something looks quite good, you can go ahead and hit the apply button. So that's now been applied. Now, of course, you can go ahead and undo at any point in the process as well. So the other thing that I will do quite often is I'll use the Glamour Glow. Now, think of this a little bit like the Orton effect. And again, just like in a lot of the tool sets, you've got different sort of settings to be applied. And again, it's just personal preference. I'm just going to go for 2 here. Now, it doesn't look like there's maybe been anything applied there, but again, if you go into the before and the after, you can see it's giving a little bit of sheen to the brighter areas. And again, I just want to kind of reduce that glow down just a touch. And again, whenever you reduce it down and you look at it, you might think, well, there's nothing has been applied. But again, just looking at that before and the after, you can see now that that glow is mostly just applied to the brighter parts of the image. Next up, what you might want to do is play a little bit with the temperature. So again, just going into white balance, and it's quite typical in white balance, you've got both temperature and tint. So we'll just warm this up just a touch. And again, doing that before and after, you can sort of see what sort of, just a minimal bit of difference that it can actually apply. Of course, you can actually go ahead and use a little spot tool to sort of pick the white balance based upon the temperature of the image that it's actually picking over. But I'll quite often just go in and apply my temperature based upon a manual setting. So we'll just put that back up again to 5. Now, the other one that I sometimes will play with will be the curves. And this is relatively feature rich, because not only do you have the overall curve feature, but you can also do the various color channels, the red, green and blue color channel, as well as the luminance. So first of all, let's go in and pick another preset. We'll sort of maybe look at darken, and you can get rid of the curves tool for now, and it's maybe a little bit harsh. I actually quite like the faded look. Might just need, let's just go in and let's just see whether we can, this is, yeah, there you go. Let's just bring the luminance up just a touch in those midtones. And again, we'll get rid of the, yeah, that'll do me. So that's my image now edited. And of course, as I said before, you can go in, you can actually view the edits, and you can actually go in, and if you wanted to, we could actually take out pretty much everything that we have done, or you can edit each one of those steps as well. So pretty feature rich, and as I say, at this stage, non-destructive to your image as well. Okay, so now we want to export our image. One of the things that I'll quite often do with my image is I'll make 2 copies. I'll make a copy sometimes with a frame around it, and that's for exporting to things like Twitter and Facebook. And then I'll also export one without a frame, and that's typically for Instagram. But under the export, we've got a couple of different options. Save a copy or export a permanent version of it, uneditable, or at least those changes uneditable. That's difficult to say, uneditable. Don't think it's even a word. So what I'll normally do is click on Save a Copy, and that will allow me then to reopen that image and go back and make changes to the file. And just as an example of that, if I go in and open from device, and I go into my Snapseed folder, and I'll bring up any one of these images. So let's bring up this one here. This was a gorgeous morning on the Isle of Harris in the Outer Hebrides. So if I use that, now I edited this and posted this several months ago, probably 6 months ago. But if I go into the undo button again and view the edits, you can see here's all the edits that we had in place. So I actually had a details layer in there. That's just for a little bit of sharpening. But if I wanted to, I could just bring everything back. I actually did a little bit, it looks like I did a little bit of tuning to the image as well. So you see that I increased the contrast a little bit. and I also brought the warmth up in here, brought down the highlights. So yeah, one of the tools that you do have is actually sort of basic tuning. But here I also applied a little bit of a crop, applied the good old vintage filter, and you can see exactly what you did with the vintage filter as well. So again, I chose number 11, increased the saturation, left the style strength at 20, and brought that vignette way down to 15. And then I say that sharpen level as well. So really, really feature-rich little application, Snapseed. I absolutely love it. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed that little intro into how I edit probably 90% of the images that I take on the iPhone. I love editing with Snapseed. I really love the power, all of the different tools. So this was very much a 10,000 foot view of the app. Lots and lots of other options that you have in there. I love how its layer function is non-destructive as well, meaning that you can go back and actually re-edit those images again. So I'm going to call it there. Going to head outside and get my 1 bit of yard time today. It's actually a really beautiful day out there. And I'll leave you with a couple of images that I shot on the iPhone, edited on the iPhone, that I quite like. And then to finish off with, at the beginning of the year, I was heading out with the iPhone over the course of a couple of weeks, shooting some footage using the slow-mo function, and then kind of merging that into a little stills photo using the live option on the iPhone, so you can create a sort of pseudo long exposure image. And I was kind of putting those together as little 15-second sort of animations movies on Instagram. Given the fact that we're talking about the iPhone and these were shot and edited on the iPhone, I thought it'd be quite fun just to put those in to finish things off. As always, hope everyone's keeping safe and well during these very challenging times, and we'll catch up again soon. Bye-bye.